Alright, so I'm going to start with basically the poster girl for the game. We're going to start with Tracer. She's pretty cool, and I think she is definitely one of the examples of what you can kind of do with this game that makes it unique and how they can really change up the gameplay. So Tracer is kind of a teleporter. She's got twin pistols that fire really quickly and have to reload quickly. So almost like it looks like she does a lot of burst damage in this case. She's got twin rapid fire pistols. Now what I've noticed from these gameplay footages is that most characters only have one weapon. So you think of TF2, you've got a primary, you've got a secondary, sometimes a melee or sidearm of some sort. So, you know, in TF2, your soldier's got your rocket launcher, but he's also got a shotgun, and he's got a spade. In this, it looks like you don't really have that. So you've got the dual pistols, which appears to be her pretty much only, her primary weapon. There doesn't appear to be a secondary weapon that she has. She has a movement ability called Blink, which you have 3 charges of. So you can teleport several meters away, and you can combine them all rapidly if you want, and then wait for them to come back, or you can use them one at a time, and because they recharge on an individual basis. When you use one, there's a certain cooldown before you get that one back. So if you use them all, you have to wait to get them all back. If you use one at a time, you might not have as long of a wait. So, but that's really cool that you can actually move around very quickly, and it's going to be a very high mobility class. And this is what I was talking about. This game's focusing for a lot of its lighter classes, heavy mobility. It's going to probably be balanced around that whole idea of moving quickly, getting in and out, for some of these characters at least. So she can move around, she can teleport around defenses. So if there's a choke point, this is your character that can get past that point. And then the final ability she has as a standard ability is Recall. You leap backwards in time. It takes about 3 seconds back. Now, looking at the footage of the gameplay, it looks like this is roughly on a 12-second cooldown, which is very short, because this ability, if you've ever played Smite, if you've ever played as Kronos, you know what this ability can do. You can go in, do a bunch of damage, take a bunch of damage, and then retreat. Now, Tracer is a light character, so she can't really take a ton of damage, but she can still go in, do some serious damage, rewind back 3 seconds, get the health back to where she was 3 seconds ago. So again, teleport in, get behind an ambush, and then rewind. And then, who knows, your blinks should be back by then. Alright, so those are just her base abilities. Now, every character does have an ultimate ability, and they did talk about this a bit. Apparently, taking damage and doing damage are ways to build up this ultimate combo bar, and I'm guessing every character is going to have a different rate at which they can build it, because some of these things are really, really powerful, and some of them are semi-powerful or utility-based, so it looks like you might need them more often. In Tracer's case, she's got a pulse bomb, which is very much a sticky bomb. It lands on, looks like it lands onto any surface, or enemy. It looks like it can actually land on enemies as well, so you can probably put it on turrets. And then after a few seconds, it blows up. Being an ultimate ability, there's probably no way to stop it, but you do have a brief moment to try and run away. But that is her ultimate, the Pulse Bomb. So very cool. You can basically move in when you've got your ultimate bar, teleport in, throw down your Pulse Bomb, and then recall out and do a bunch of damage. So definitely a lot of burst and movement potential there on Tracer. The next character we're going to go off is kind of her... kind of a similar character, very high movement, very much burst damage, and that's Reaper. So Reaper uses dual shotguns. So those are the two. It looks like they're pistols, but when you look at them up close, they're definitely high in shotguns. He must have very strong forearms, because to be able to deal with that kind of kick is amazing. All right, so once again, it looks like just a single weapon on this character, 2 shotguns. His second ability is Wraith Form. He becomes a shadow for a short period of time, and while in this form he can take no damage. He's able to pass through enemies, but he also can't fire his weapon. So it's a lot like Tracer, because it's very movement oriented. He turns into this Wraith Form, and while he's not teleporting, he's taking no damage, which means he can move through choke points or move out of tough situations. He can't be body blocked, because Wraith Form will allow him to just get right out of it. Looking at Wraith Form, at this time it looks like that's got an 8-second cooldown, so it can be used relatively reliably. His last standard ability is Shadow Step. You can mark a destination and then disappear and reappear at that location. So from the footage, it looks like you're basically putting down a reticle, marking where you want to go, and then you teleport there instantly. It's got about a 15-second cooldown from the current footage available. So another character that's able to kind of move in and out of defenses, although Shadow Step looks like it's got something of a setup time. If you're quick, you can it's probably not a big deal because you can put it down, but there also is what appears to be an animation charge-up time. When you put it down, it takes you about 2, maybe 3 seconds to basically teleport from where you are. So it's not really more of an escape move. It looks like it's going to be a way to move around the map to get the positions that you might want to try and flank with. So it's not something that looks like it's going to be used quickly, probably not even for chasing, but he is a character that can maneuver himself around defenses. And he is really based around burst, because if you look at his final ability, it is Death Blossom, which might have a resemblance to the Demon Hunter Strafe. In a blur of motion, you will empty both of your shotguns at breakneck speeds, and you do massive damage to all nearby enemies. So from the footage you can see that, yeah, he spins around and does a crap ton of damage. Every time I've seen the ability activate, Reaper has scored multiple kills with that. So it is it's a short duration, but it's a massive AoE. Right, WIDOWMAKER is your token sniper. I mean, you pretty much have to have one of these in games nowadays, which kind of saddens me because I hate snipers, but it looks like there is more to her than that. Alright, so she is one of the first characters that seems to have multiple fire modes. Not every character appears to have alternate fire. A lot of characters do appear to have alt fire, so there are going to be characters that you can use a weapon in more than one way. And WIDOWMAKER is definitely the first, because what you've got is the sniper rifle, what you can use the scope to do aim shots at enemies, and as we've seen from some of the shoutcasts from the game footage, it could be a one-shot kill on the head, if not pretty close. It looks like it might depend on what class. That one's hard to say, because in Team Fortress 2, when you have a fully charged up shot, if you hit in the head, you'll have to forgive me, it's been a long time, but I do recall being able to pretty much splatter heavies if you were good, if you could hit the head. Can also engage medium to close range targets by shifting it out of rifle mode, and it has something of a submachine gun mode. It can be fired in fully automatic, which obviously means it's not going to do as much damage. Now this is kind of reminiscent of Team Fortress 2 Sniper as well, since you have the ability to fire your weapon, or fire at least a submachine gun pistol with that character. As far as how powerful WIDOWMAKER is going to be when she's not firing in rifle mode, I don't know. But she does have some defensive capabilities of her own to keep herself safe if someone's trying to flank her. She has high movement. Like, you need to get into high spaces when you're a sniper in order to really make use of your weapon. And in order to do that, you've got a grappling hook. You can target areas below a window or something, draw yourself in, pull yourself up, which is really cool. Again, this game just really oozes mobility. Although the grappling hook does have what appears to be a 12-second cooldown, the fact that you can kind of move around and get to almost any rooftop that you want to is ideal for a sniping character. Now, there are going to be places that you're going to not be able to defend your back very easily, so you're going to have the Venom Mine. You can adhere these Venom Mines to nearly any surface, and when a target gets within range, it explodes and it delivers a poison gas to any enemy in the vicinity. So it's not going to be one of those boom, you're dead kind of things. It's going to start doing damage over time, but it is a way of watching your flank or your back, or helping your team hold off choke points, putting it in a spot that you know an enemy is going to go by. Doing damage over time can certainly hinder their offense, especially if an enemy character has been buffed to hell and back. Her ultimate ability really exemplifies the idea that she's a scout, and I kind of like the idea that snipers has been scouts in several games. For example, Battlefield 3 and 4, scouts. Snipers can be scouts. You don't have to use sniper rifles. And your ultimate for WIDOWMAKER kind of shows that as well. You get infrasight. You have a recon visor that allows you to see heat signatures of targets through walls, and it lasts for a moderate amount of time, it says. It's shared with your allies, though, which is the most important part. So you activate it. It does look like it has a fairly lengthy duration. It looks like it takes somewhere around 15 seconds before it finally stops. But the fact that it shares with your teammate is vital. So you can really coordinate against enemies that may think you don't know where they are. So she does have utility aside from snipers. Typically, I don't want to alienate snipers that may be watching me, but a lot of snipers, when you play these kind of games, tend to very much focus on getting the kills. And a lot of them don't help with objectives. Now, sometimes that's by design. You look at Team Fortress 2, again, for an example, and a lot of the snipers, if an enemy gets past you, there's only so much you can do because your fast weapon doesn't really do a lot of damage. All you can really do is try and prevent more enemies from getting through. If an objective is taken, sometimes you can relocate to stop them from getting out of another choke point. When it comes to WIDOWMAKER, she's got the mines and she's got her ultimate that will allow her to do damage to enemies, weaken them, soften them, and tell her team where the enemies are. So there is a lot she can do, and that kind of, to me, makes me think of Battlefield as well when you have things like recon drones. So she seems like a character, even though I don't normally care for snipers, she might be a sniper that I actually try out. Winston is one of the cool, fun characters that this game is presenting, a giant gorilla from the moon. He is a tank, so he operates in the role of soaking up damage. And they do have roles in this game. They have the offense, defense, tank, and support. Although you don't have to be purely limited by those. They simply give you an idea of what type of gameplay type this character will benefit most. And Winston is certainly a character that soaks up damage. He has a Tesla cannon, a short-ranged lightning gun, which according to the footage looks like it does a little bit of an AoE burst in the frontal cone of Winston's vision. So it's not a high precision weapon, it's not a weapon that that you have to be precise with. It is a weapon though that allows you to do a lot of damage to a group of enemies when you need to as you're moving in, soaking up damage for your team. Even though he's a big, heavy guy, he has some nice mobility. And again, another focus of this game. He has an energy pack that he can use to kind of jetpack around. Allows him to jump up really high. And it looks like it's one of those, and again, 8-second cooldown, very short cooldown. It's not perfect flight. You basically jump up really high and then you fall down. And when you land, you do something of a shockwave, which can stagger enemies nearby. Being a tank, he also has a shield projector that he can put down, and it is a bubble, a shield bubble, and it lands kind of on the ground at your feet. So one of the big strategies a lot of players were using was to take the energy projector and throw it down on top of the payload, because it lands on the surface, and if it lands on the payload, it moves with the payload. So it's a great defensive ability. Now, unlike a lot of games that where you kind of have a shield, a lot of shields are kind of two ways. You can't shoot in or out. It depends on the game you play. Some games don't do that. But in this game, you can shoot out of shields. So any character that has a shield, be it a held shield or a shield bubble, enemies can't shoot in, but allies can shoot out. So you can put it down, and it becomes this bastion, if you will, and you can use it to just hold your ground and keep enemies out. His ultimate ability changes him up a bit. He no longer has his lightning gun. He gets primal rage, and he turns into a very, very mad monkey or ape, whatever you want to call him. He gains health, and he gets a melee attack. So instead of having his lightning gun, he has a melee attack, which honestly is going to make him a bit harder to hit things with. Usually in first-person games, unless you've played that a lot, and I kind of reference natural selection too here because I've seen it happen. Players who are good can be really good with melee attacks, but characters that haven't done that very often will miss a lot because you have a very narrow cone. It's going to be hard to tell with Winston because it looks like from his animations he's got some wide sweeping action, so it may be a little easier for him to hit his target, but it's nowhere near the forgiving weapon that his Tesla cannon is. But it allows him to use a very strong melee attack and use his jump pack more frequently. So the jump pack already has an 8-second cooldown. With this, who knows, they may cut it down in half every 4 seconds or something. But so you basically have your melee and your jump pack. You lose the shield and you lose the cannon. But you gain a lot of health from this, so it'll make you very tough to kill, and this can be very useful for getting in there and slamming around, again, a very entrenched enemy. So there are ways, and that's one thing I'm really liking about this. In Team Fortress 2, if you've got an entrenched enemy, there's not very many ways to get past that, and really the only ultimate you have in Team Fortress 2 is something of the meta gun, in which you get an uber charge and then gain invulnerability. I never really quite liked that, because it always felt like everything was on the shoulders of the medics. And it just really forced this passive style kind of play in which you're sitting there, and the only way to get up uber charge, unless you have a special item, I would say, because I don't know all the items anymore in Team Fortress 2, the whole thing is to play passively and just constantly heal. So you might have a medic sitting there with a soldier who's constantly hurting himself, so the medic could get an uber charge just to break through this defense, and if it fails, you got to do it all over again. Here in Overwatch, every character has some kind of ultimate. And we've already looked at several characters that can burst through defenses. We've looked at Tracer and Reaper, who can just kind of phase through things and get in there and maybe do a bit of burst and get out. We're looking at WINSTON now, who can give himself a ton of health and go in and just bust things up. There are options now, and I like that. It seems like what they're going for is fast-paced gameplay. Because Team Fortress 2, while it can be kind of fast, can come down to a slog. I've seen some games just be this massive kill box zone, held by sentries, heavy weapons guys, soldiers pushing you around, keeping you from getting in the room. I mean, and it becomes this point where as long as you have the certain checkpoints held, people are going to have a hard time getting through. And again, I've seen that change at the drop of a hat with like 2 or 3 Ubers coming through. And to me, that just always felt like this really awkward balance, that you could have this defense going and be playing well, and then just those boom, 3 things did it. Now every character has an ultimate, so every character can contribute to getting past these entrenchments. And it seems like, you look at Heroes of the Storm, that's kind of what they're doing. Heroes of the Storm is faster paced gameplay. The objectives can be taken a little bit quicker, towers can die a little bit quicker. A lot of things are focused around the hero battles, but it's not a game where you have to sit there and grind up experience before your hero becomes super useful, depending upon what role you play. Some characters are better late game, but looking at other MOBA style games, there are heroes that don't become useful at all until like nearly the end of the game, and at least from the descriptions I've read. I haven't played them, so I can't say that for sure. You can feel free to correct me, but I'm basically correcting myself at this point. It looks like Blizzard really wants to go for that fast-paced gameplay, and we're seeing that not only in Heroes of the Storm, but now Overwatch. Now, Pharah's pretty cool. She takes the idea of like the TF2 soldier and amps him up to something like 11 or 12, maybe even 13, because she's got a jetpack. So she's really cool. Rocket launcher. Alright, so she's a basic soldier, right? She's get 8 shots, and then she's got to reload. That's cool. Alright, basic soldier. Great. She can fly. What? Okay, yes. You don't have to rocket jump as Pharah. I imagine you probably could, but you don't need to, because not only do you have your rockets, you have a jetpack with a 10-second cooldown. So if you needed to rocket jump in 10 seconds, I guess you could, but that means you don't have to hurt yourself to get the high points. You use your jump jets. But not only that, but she has a jetpack that she can use while jumping. So if you've got this long pit or whatever you need to navigate over, if you jump and use your space bar, you will use a jetpack that will slow your descent or outright stop it for a little bit. It can't be used very long, but what that means is you basically have a jetpack to get high, and then you can coast a little bit going downwards. So you have pretty much accessibility to probably almost anywhere on a map. I can't imagine many other characters having more maneuverability than Pharah does when it comes to reaching any choke point that she wants. There are characters that are going to be a little faster and have more agility than Pharah, but she can definitely get to high points. Her secondary ability, and again, we talked about not having a secondary weapon, so it seems a lot of what you have are abilities that act as secondary weapons, and in this case you have a concussive blasts. It's a wrist rocket launcher that knocks enemies, it strikes back, and it can deal immense damage to shields and barriers. So what we're looking at is a weapon that, if you don't want to hit the enemy, like you could hit an enemy with your rocket, and it probably has a little bit of knockaround, as you would expect. And anyone that's played Soldier in TF2 knows that that's what your gameplay style is all about. You use your rockets to destabilize the enemy, you knock them into the air, and they have a hard time recovering from that, and if you're good while they're in the air, you just hit them again. Well, what if the rocket doesn't knock back too far? What if you really need to push an enemy off of a balcony or something like that? Well, that's where concussive blast comes in. It knocks back a lot further than the rockets do, so you can knock the enemies back. The other thing is that that second part of that description is it does a lot of damage to shields and barriers. So this is your character that's going to be sitting there and going to push past defensive players. So if you've got an enemy team that's using nothing but defense, tons of shields and bubbles, then coming in with a Pharah can really be helpful, because then you can use that concussive blast to start doing a lot of damage to shields. Unfortunately, it does look like it has something of a 12-second cooldown between blasts. But the nice ultimate ability can definitely help with that. You get Barrage. You basically turn on your jetpack and you hover where you are. If you're standing on the ground, you hover maybe a foot off the ground or something like that. If you jetpack into the air and then use it, you will hover in the air and stay there. It is a continuous salvo of a bunch of little rockets. I don't know how much damage it does, other than the fact that every time I've seen it used, much like Reaper, enemies die. I don't know how weak those enemies were to set up the shots or whatever, but it does a lot of damage. So that is one of the really cool ultimates. Just being able to go up there and unleash terror from the skies. I really like that. That looks like a character I would probably enjoy playing. Alright, let's go on and move on to another tank. This is Reinhardt. Reinhardt is really cool. He is a melee character in this game of characters with guns. Even Winston, who is somewhat short range, he has the lightning gun, which allows him to do a cone of damage. Reinhardt does not. Reinhardt has nothing but his rocket hammer. He runs around swinging this hammer that's got rockets on the end of it to help him swing harder. It is a massive amount of damage, and it is a wide arc according to the description, so it's probably not going to be as hard to hit enemies with the hammer as it would be in some other games, which I like. I like the fact it's a little bit forgiving, but it means that you're going to have to play keep away with Reinhardt if you're not careful. He is also one of the defensive characters that carries a shield. You project a forward shield on your arm, and you can absorb a substantial amount of damage before it's destroyed. However, while using the shield, you can't attack. But that means you can have a Reinhardt pushing forward on your offense. Or if you have a defense that needs to push into another choke point, you can have a Reinhardt holding his shield up, and you're moving forward, you're inching forward with his shield up, and you can shoot through that shield towards your enemies. So it can be a walking defensive platform. His final ability is Charge. You charge forward in a straight line. You can almost think, I think of the Demo Man when I think of this. The Demo Man when he's got his Charge and Targe. It's kind of like that. You charge in a straight line, and you grab a hold of an enemy in your path. The big thing here, though, is if you collide with a wall while holding an enemy, they will suffer extra damage. So it is a huge amount of potential damage. In fact, it looked like from the preview footage, and you'll see it here, of course, taking a full life HANZO and smacking him against the wall was an instant kill. So you have to be careful about Reinhardts. You can avoid them because obviously, what do they have? They have a short range arc, which is nearby. So if you're using mobility, you can keep away from them. And they've got a charge ability, which is a very narrow line, so you can kind of get around it. So he's basically taking the extreme path here of very narrow abilities, but massive damage. So he's balanced in that he hits really hard, but he has a hard time hitting to enemies that are keeping away from him. But at the same time, he's not completely useless if he can't get up close because he can be a defensive platform. I apologize, I lied. Charge was not his final ability. Looking at the screen, he actually has multiple abilities. He has Fire Strike, so he does have something of a ranged attack. Fire Strike will whip the rocket hammer forward and sling a flaming projectile that pierces and damages enemies it touches. Now, this is on what appears to be a 6-second cooldown. So while you do have a ranged attack, it appears to be fairly slow. Much like the rest of his kit, he's going to be easy to avoid at range. So even though he has a ranged attack, he can't do it very often, every 6 seconds or so. And then he's done for a little while. I mean, he's going to basically be the short-range character, but he has an answer. If there's something he needs to hit at range, be it a turret or maybe a sniper that's not paying attention, he can do it. So he does have options that do not limit him at long range, but again, it's the very, I say very long cooldown because 6 seconds doesn't seem like a long cooldown, but when it's your only ranged attack, that is massive in a game like this. Right, his ultimate ability is Earth Shatter. You slam the rocket hammer into the ground, you knock down and damage all enemies in front of you. Looking at it, it is not a massively damaging attack. Reinhardt being a tank is more on the support line when it comes to his ultimate, but he does knock enemies down for a good amount of time. This is enough time for his teammates to basically come in and help with the kills. So while it might seem like, oh, well, that doesn't seem too ultimate, you got to think about this in terms of a first-person shooter. In the first-person shooter, seconds cost lives, and that definitely is something with a team. Like, if you're on your own, yeah, okay. If you're playing Reinhardt and you're solo, that's probably not great. But with a team, that's massive. Alright, SYMMETRA is the first support character we'll take a look at here. She's pretty neat. I like her and what she can do. She's got a weapon that is kind of dual purpose. She's got a short-range beam that homes in on an enemy, and it can deal continuous damage that increases the longer it's connected. Blizzard and their Void Rays, right? The projector can also release a charged energy ball that deals high damage. So you've got two options. You basically got a continuous damage ability, or you've got a burst of high damage. But the burst takes a while to charge up, so it may not be too easy to use. She's more for the support, she's more for the continual damage, but if you've got an enemy with a shield coming at you, you do have an answer for it. Being a support character, SYMMETRA doesn't really fight by herself. She's got sentry turrets. Now, they're not pure sentries in the form that you might be thinking of in TF2. These are kind of little mini sentries. You can set up a bunch of them that fire their speed-reducing blasts at the nearest enemy within range. You can build, I believe they said, somewhere along 6 of these sentries in their panel, and the footage will show about 3. But the big thing is those sentries are doing continuous damage, kind of like SYMMETRA herself, so they don't do heavy damage individually, but if you put them in a group, they can start doing a lot of damage together. But their big purpose is to slow the enemy, because each one will slow the enemy's movement speed by quite a bit, and that will allow anyone else that you have to take a shot at them. Like, you know, hey, let's say your sniper isn't terribly good. Well, if they're moving slowly, they might have a better chance. Her last standard ability is Photon Shield. Now, this one interests me in the fact that it doesn't have a duration. SYMMETRA will surround an ally with a hard light shield that absorbs damage and persists as long as that ally remains alive. It has a 10-second cooldown, and my guess on this one would be that you can only have one hero shielded at a time, or it might be a bit too powerful. I say this because another character that has buff and debuff abilities can only activate them on one person at a time. So when you look at Photon Shield, I don't imagine it's going to be overpowered, because no, I don't think you can put a shield around your entire team. The fact that it lasts through the ally's entire life, that's pretty nice. So you can basically pick one person that's going to be your major support, maybe even your defense. Or, you know, if you're going to go in and you're about to destabilize an enemy position, you can put that down. And with multiple support units, you can buff them even further with continuous healing. So you can make one person be really badass. But it takes, of course, your support characters to do that. But I think that's pretty neat. Again, everything I read about this game is pretty much getting me into it. So I'm really looking forward to and hoping I'll get this beta. But let's move on. Looking at her final ability, her ultimate. This is where it interests me, because this is an ultimate ability that doesn't do anything for you, anything against the enemy team, other than be a massive support, and that is the teleporter. So yes, much like a TF2 engineer, she can put a teleporter down, but it is her ultimate ability, which means she can't put one down easily if it's lost. Teleporters have been the bane and the life. It is something you either love or hate when it comes to Team Fortress 2, because a well-placed teleporter position will allow a team to continually put pressure on the enemy. And in TF2, those could be rebuilt pretty quickly, although you have to kind of continually rebuild on them. But the thing is if someone makes a sacrifice in TF2, they get behind enemy lines and they destroy a teleporter. Well, if you made that sacrifice and your team isn't pushing hard enough to get to it, the engineers are just going to rebuild it, and boom, they've got their forward line again. Here, the teleporter is an ultimate ability, so if you make that sacrifice and kill the teleporter, then you have that chance that SYMMETRA doesn't have her ultimate ability back up. And since it's done by either taking or receiving damage, it doesn't seem like getting your ultimate is done through other means. Now, her sentries do give her marks in her ultimate bar from the footage I've seen, but it is fairly slow. But that means that she should possibly have her ultimate back up. Alright, so we've talked throughout this about comparisons to Team Fortress 2. Well, you're about to get the highest level of comparison to Team Fortress 2 right now. We have Torbjorn, the dwarf that makes sentries. So he is very much like the engineer. So we've got two engineer types, but his sentry mimics the TF2 sentry almost on a one-to-one basis, as you'll probably see here. So he starts off with the rivet gun. It's a long range, it has a long range shot, or it has a close range burst. So he does have alt fire on his rivet gun. It looks like, from what I've seen in the footage, is there's a little bit of fall off on his gun as well. So while it can be long range, you might have to have a little bit of accuracy to hit something with it. but it does have that short-range burst should you need it. And let's face it, when you're an engineer, enemies like to come up to your sentry, and that can be very helpful. Now, there are no spies in this game to sap your sentry, so you may not have to worry about that as much, but with all the ultimates in the game, you're probably going to have other things to be concerned about. Alright, so the Forge Hammer is his kind of melee weapon that he gets. It's a multi-purpose hammer. It's what he uses to build, so kind of like the wrench for the engineer. It can repair turrets and can be used as a weapon. So let's look at his primary ability, building turrets. You construct an enemy tracking autocannon. You can use scrap you collect from dead enemies, sounding like Team Fortress 2, and allies, to repair or upgrade it. You can increase its health, you can add a second cannon, and you can also add a rocket launcher. Once again, sounds like Team Fortress 2. You start off with a basic cannon, it turns into kind of a minigun, and then it gets rockets on its final tier. So yeah, I mean, it's an homage to TF2, but let's face it, I'm not really sure how else you could do it. I mean, SYMMETRA's already got some really unique turrets. Adding a standard turret like this just kind of seems like a standard trope to have in a game like this. It makes sense to me. So yeah, Torbjorn is pretty much the NG, but he doesn't get dispensers. So there is that. There's a difference, right? Alright, but he does have this. He does have the armor pack. Torbjorn deploys an armor upgrade. Either he or his allies can pick it up to absorb damage. And then lastly, his ultimate is Molten Core. You overheat your personal forge, and then you gain a significant amount of armor and scrap, and you can also build and repair a lot faster. So if you need to get your sentry position back up fast, you can go ahead and use Molten Core, and you will build your sentry just super fast. So unlike TF2, you have an answer for your defenses going down. You have an ultimate ability to get your defenses right back up. The only real way to do that in Team Fortress 2 was kind of coordinate with other engineers, which was pretty easy to do if other people swapped to engineer and then back again. But at least in this game, if you've got your ultimate, you don't have to do that, so you don't have to take time off the battlefield. Again, focusing on what appears to be faster gameplay from Blizzard's end. Bastion is our heavy weapons guy of this game, it would appear, although he does it in a very unique way. When he buckles down, he don't move, because Bastion is the turret. Yes. Alright, so he has two configurations. He has Configuration Assault, Configuration Siege. He's a transforming robot. Configuration Assault is his robot mode. You have a fully mobile outfit with a submachine gun that fires steady bursts of bullets. It's a medium-range weapon. You configure into Siege mode in order to become a stationary powerhouse. This gives you the forward-facing shield and a Gatling gun that can put out a massive amount of bullets. Now, the description here says something about the gun's aim can be walked across multiple targets, dealing devastating damage at short to medium range. I'm essentially figuring that what they're saying there is that you're just firing a lot of damage, and because you're firing so fast, if a group of enemies comes on, you can basically deal with a group of enemies. Now, it does say it's short to medium range, so it looks like they're balancing him out with not allowing him to, by giving him a massive amount of conal fire difference for long-range targets, which is essentially what the heavy weapons guy does. He spends up his minigun and he loses a lot of his, even at short range actually. You can usually hit most of your bullets on something at short range, but the conal fire on a heavy weapons guy is pretty wide to begin with. For Bastion, it looks like it's a little more tight, but again, he's a stationary character, and when he buckles down, that forward shield is definitely something to be wary of. So not only does he buckle down and do a lot of damage, he can take a lot of damage as well, which you have to be careful for. He does have a self-repair ability. So I think of him as a heavy weapons guy because the heavy weapons guy ultimately got an item called the sandwich. So if you take away heavy weapons guy's shotgun and give him a sandwich, he's Bastion, except for he can't transform. So it makes me laugh a little bit. But yes, he has self-repair. You can restore your health, but you can't move or fire weapons while the process is in effect. I can't tell if you are able to cancel the repair animation at any time. It would be my guess that they would not let you. It's probably one of those risk-reward types of gameplay things where, okay, if you want to sit and repair, you've got to sit and repair. So I've compared so many different games to this game now. I think of Hawken now, because Hawken, you have a self-repair. And in that game, though, you can cancel it, because the self-repair is kind of a steady thing. You can ultimately get it back up to full, but you can cancel it if you need to. In this, the animation, I've been looking at the animation, and it's hard to say, because there is no indicator that there's a cooldown in effect. It's that the button has to be held down. So I really don't know about that one. Not having played it on the show floor, unfortunately, I'm not sure about how his self-repair will work. So I'll have to look forward to that when I get a chance to try him, if I get a chance to try him. His ultimate ability is a remote mine. You can remotely place a mine, and basically if you look at the footage, you throw a mine down, it gets treads, and you can put this mine wherever you want without moving yourself into harm's way. So you put this mine down, and it will trigger when an enemy gets close, and it does a substantial amount of damage in a large area. It's, looking at the way it operates, it almost feels a lot like Reaper's ultimate, but it's something you put down as a defensive position. So you put it down and an enemy gets near, and then it's got a wide range, much like Reaper does. So that's pretty cool. That makes Bastion very much a very powerful support character, because if he can sit there and hold a position for a little while, he can then put defensively down this remote mine. Now, I'm kind of hoping that you can't destroy those, because it looked, from the footage I've seen, the mine itself, when it burrowed into the ground, well, you don't even get to see it very much in the footage I've seen, but it looks like it would be somewhat obvious, and it would suck to have an ultimate ability that would be so easily taken care of. So I'm hoping that you're able to put it down, and the counteraction to that might be to have a character with a defensive shield go in against it, or maybe just sacrifice one person, I guess. I mean, it is looking like a fast-paced game, so one sacrifice might not be too bad. It's hard to say, because obviously if it's not something you can shoot out easily, then it becomes one of those almost, like, how do you get past this? Like, someone's going to have to die. But again, I don't have as much details on that, so we'll have to see going forward. We're moving on now to HANZO. HANZO is one of the offense characters. He uses a bow and arrow rather than a gun. He can knock and fire his bow at his target. It does look like it does a fairly high amount of damage from the footage I've seen. HANZO is kind of a scout type character because his second ability is a sonic arrow. He can launch an arrow that contains a sonar tracking device, and any enemy within its detection radius is visibly marked. And I believe it will mark also for your team. That isn't expressly said there, but since WIDOWMAKER can do it, I imagine HANZO can. He has an ability called Scatter Arrow, which he shoots a fragmenting arrow that ricochets off walls and objects that can strike multiple targets at once. So it looks like it hits a wall, splits off into multiple arrows. Unfortunately, I don't see a cooldown on the footage I have, but that is pretty cool. You can get a massive burst. Like when you're a character using a bow and arrow, one of the things that typically becomes an issue is multiple enemies coming at you at once. That gives you an answer to having multiple enemies in your field of view to deal with. Now, he has one of the more impressive looking ultimates in the game called Dragon Strike. It summons a spirit dragon that travels through the air in a line. This is the important part. It travels through walls in its way and devours enemies it encounters. So we were talking about entrenched defenses and what you can do against those, and we've already talked about characters being able to teleport past them and characters that have massive bursts of damage to get past them. Now we have a character that can shoot through walls using his ultimate. So if you know where the enemies are, maybe your sonic arrow has told you, or maybe WIDOWMAKER has highlighted everybody for you. If you know there's an entrenched position and your team is having a hard time getting past a choke point, you could possibly fire this Dragon Strike into their defenses to take them out. So again, lots of answers here, lots of really cool ideas that have been maybe briefly explored in some other games, but I'm liking the fact that this game is taking the time to do a lot of these really interesting ideas. So we've only got a couple left. We have Mercy, who has the Caduceus staff, which is, you know, essentially the symbol for healers or medics. And yeah, oh, anyway, it has one of two beam modes that can connect to an ally. And this is going to sound a lot like the TF2 medic. You can maintain a beam that can either restore health or increase the amount of damage they deal. So I say the TF2 medic because you've got the healing gun that the medic normally has, but they do have specialty medic guns you can get that will increase your allies' damage. Although in Team Fortress 2, it works by giving them, you have to use the Uber, right? You have the option of two things. One, either making your allies invulnerable, or two, making them do tons of damage. In this case, the damage is an option rather than healing, so you can increase the damage of one person you need to. Caduceus Blaster is Mercy's sidearm, so she does have a weapon to defend herself with, but it is best reserved for personal defense reasons, as listed in their description. So she can do a bit of damage, but once again, it's one of those not really recommended. Like Although I'm not sure what to think about that, because the medic class in Team Fortress 2, what I liked about the medic was if you were good with your needle gun, you could do a little bit amount of damage. Now, it's probably going to be somewhere around that. You can probably do a decent amount of damage if you're good with it, but at the same time, other classes that are just as good will ultimately win out just by virtue of being a damage-based class. Her two other abilities are purely movement. So really all you've got is your beam and your sidearm, and everything else is movement. But this is essential for a healer that wants to get in and get that clutch healer to help her allies. Guardian Angel will fly you towards a targeted ally. It allows you to reach them quickly and provide assistance very fast. This is something you're going to need for fast characters. So let's say you're healing a Tracer who's moving very quickly. Maybe Pharah who's flying around the map. Guardian Angel will allow you to fly to them very quickly. You also have Angelic Descent, so while you're flying through the air, if you need to land, you can slow yourself down if you're falling from great heights. So you have ways of moving around the map that not every other character may have. The big thing when it comes to Mercy is her ultimate. She has a Resurrect ability, and it's an AoE. So you can radiate restorative power, bringing nearby dead allies back with full health. Since that's an ultimate, that doesn't feel like it's too bad. Like, I've seen resurrections happen in games. I looked at Battlefield, in which medics could really be a massive force to be reckoned with because you could basically regenerate your team. And coming back to full health sometimes seems like that's a bit much because you've killed that person once, now you got to kill them again, and they haven't lost any time. That can be destabilizing, but this is an ultimate, which means it's not going to happen a lot. It's AoE as well, so what that tells me is that this is going to be something that's not going to happen frequently, but it is something you'll have to worry about when a Mercy's in the area. So really, focusing on that medic has always been the rallying cry for those of us who play TF2. Is like, why are you shooting the heavy? Shoot the medic. You really want to shoot Mercy, because that ultimate ability will bring back everyone you just killed. And lastly, we have ZENYATTA, which is a very interesting, unique character. It is a robot monk. It is a support character. You have an Orb of Destruction, an Orb of Harmony, and an Orb of Discord. Those are pretty much your three abilities. The Orb of Destruction is your primary attack. You have an alt fire on this as well. It's destructive energy orbs. You can fire them individually, or you can do a rapid fire volley that takes a few seconds to gather power. You basically can fire normally, or you can take a few seconds and then get a huge volley. So that's pretty cool. You have Orb of Harmony and Discord, which is your buff and debuffs respectively. Orb of Harmony can cast an orb on the shoulder of a single targeted ally. So long as ZENYATTA remains alive, the orb will restore the health to this ally. Only one ally can receive the benefit. So I talked before about the shield that SYMMETRA has. In this case, Orb of Harmony is a constant heal, but it can only happen to one person. Kind of like Mercy. Mercy has to focus on one person with her staff, but she has to follow that person around. ZENYATTA doesn't have to do that. You can put the Orb of Harmony on someone and then go on and help someone else. So you can put the Hard Light Shield on somebody and the Orb of Harmony on somebody, and they'd have benefit of both. They'd have the shield reducing the damage and the Orb of Harmony healing them. And that was a strategy that was employed in one of the Shoutcast matches that they showed at BlizzCon. And it was a massive amount of healing. People had a hard time killing a Reaper that was buffed with both of these on them. So it's really powerful when used correctly. The debuff you have is the Orb of Discord. It attaches the orb to an opponent that amplifies the amount of damage they receive for as long as ZENYATTA lives. Only one opponent can suffer the orb's effects at a time. So just like Harmony, Discord can only happen on one enemy. Now, it does not do damage, it simply amplifies it. So in order for you to do damage, you'd have to use your primary attack or your Orbs of Destruction. So ZENYATTA is an interesting support character in that you have one buff, one debuff, and then everything else you basically have to use your auto attacks for. So ZENYATTA may be kind of a mid-round, kind of all-around type character. Because usually support characters are balanced by a virtue of doing less damage. So I imagine ZENYATTA will probably do a little less damage than most, but more than some other supports, just because really once you put out your Harmony and your Discord, you're not really doing much else. Other than that, you have your ultimate, Transcendence. Zenyatta enters a state of heightened existence for a short period of time, and while transcended, Zenyatta cannot use abilities or weapons, but is immune to damage and automatically restores his health and that of nearby allies. So it's basically another massive AoE heal on an ultimate, but it also makes you unkillable. So if you need to get out of a position very quickly, your team is maybe having to retreat, or maybe you're on an offensive run and you can move forward and you can be the defensive shield for your team and also heal your team as you're pushing forward on an entrenched position. So again, that's been a big thing that I've talked about here for every one of these heroes. Entrenchments can be broken fairly easy with ultimates, but they can also be just as easily replaced. You've got teleporters to get back to the field, you've got Molten Core to be able to put turrets back up, you have Bastion that can put down a massive AoE mine to clear the area back out and then return to the position and hold it again as a sentry gun. There are lots of options in both cases. It looks fun. It looks really fun with these heroes, and there are 3 more that we know about that just haven't been revealed to us and aren't on their webpage yet. And then there's the possibility of even more being added. So that is everything I know about Overwatch. I wasn't planning to spend an hour talking about it, but apparently going through all the abilities took a lot of that time. But hopefully you found this discussion interesting, especially the parts when it comes to monetization and what we know about that. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This is Overwatch. Until more information is released from Blizzard, I really don't have anything else I'm going to be able to put out. So I'll be looking forward to the beta that's coming out in 2015. Thank you very much for watching. Please, by all means, feel free to discuss or leave comments or feedback in the comment section below. I'll see you all next time.